Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The death toll continues to climb, and over 1 million people have fled Ukraine as the war between Ukraine and Russia rages on. The federal Conservatives will be picking their new leader this fall. We'll have a look at more potential candidates who've expressed interest. And Lethbridge is hosting the Tim Hortons Briar, which begins this weekend. BCN's Angela Stewart sets up one of Curling Canada's biggest events for us.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is headed to Europe as the fallout from Russia's invasion of Ukraine intensifies. Trudeau will spend next week in meetings in cities such as Berlin, London, and Warsaw, saying he's joining partners to stand against Moscow's aggression. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister met counterparts at NATO headquarters in Brussels today to coordinate continuing efforts to sanction Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. Prime Minister Trudeau says what's most important right now is how to best support the people of Ukraine.
Of course, be discussing how to continue to support Ukraine, how to strengthen democratic values around the world, and how to stand up even more for democracy, to stand against Russian aggression, and to work very hard on combating the kind of disinformation and misinformation that we know is a facet of day-to-day life these days, but a particularly strong facet of this conflict, this war in Ukraine.
More than 2,000 civilians have lost their lives across Ukraine a week into the Russian invasion. The UN also estimates that 1.2 million refugees have also fled the country since the start of the war. The head of the UN Atomic Agency says the Ukrainian nuclear plant was hit by a Russian projectile. The building that it struck, however, was a training center, and there's been no release of radiation.
Of the 6 reactors at the plant were not affected at all, and that there has been no release of radioactive material. No release of radioactive material. Here I should emphasize that for the time being it is purely Ukrainian staff running the operations there. What we have in this case, as we speak this morning at 10:45, what we have is in Chernobyl and in Zaporozhye, we have effective control of the site in the hands of Russian military forces.
Volunteers in the Ukrainian city of Lviv have been setting up bomb shelters, fearing Russian forces may advance sooner rather than later to the western part of the country.
We have to be prepared for Russian invasion to the west of Ukraine. So actually we are cleaning the bomb shelter. I do it first time today, so it's not my job actually. I am interior designer, and this is like volunteering. This is my job for these days until the war stops, and then we also have to build our country. So everything changed in 1 hour. So I heard the bomb explosion in Kyiv. I live in center. I live in peaceful district of the city, and it was immediately I understood that the war started and reality is different.
Ukrainian Christian journalist Ruslan Kukarchuk fled his home in Kyiv with his wife and 4 young children, including a 6-month-old baby. He explains his heartbreaking journey they took as they saw countless women and children being forced to walk for many kilometers to get to safety in Ukraine.
All northern big cities on northern border of Ukraine near Belarusian border, they are under the fire for now. And southern cities, of course. I mean Kherson, Odessa, and Mykolaiv. So a lot of cities on western part of Ukraine for now are full of refugees, and praise the Lord and thanks to our Ukrainian people. a lot of families in Lviv and Ternopil, Ivano-Frankivsk, and Chernihiv they really are making a huge work to help their brothers and sisters in Christ, if we speak about Christians, and they help to everybody who move here.
Christian organization Samaritan's Purse Canada is ready to deploy some much-needed help to both Poland and Ukraine. The organization has distributed over 20 tons of food to refugees in the regions. Samaritan's Purse will also be bringing in an emergency field hospital with a team of doctors, nurses, and support staff to Poland. The field hospital will then be transported to Ukraine to provide trauma care for those impacted by the war.
This unit is going to have the capacity to treat more than 100 patients per day, and it will be made up of 30 inpatient beds, an operating theater, and an intensive care unit. And so that's what, and in fact, the entire amount, we're speaking about 25 tons of hospital equipment, generators, flooring, and all that sort of thing. That's, as I say, on its way now to Poland and then on to Ukraine.
Starting next week, a cargo plane will distribute additional parts for the emergency field hospital and the equipment needed to bring 2 additional medical clinics. These clinics will then be deployed to areas with an influx of refugees. You know, many Canadians are finding it very difficult right now paying their bills. With inflation going through the roof and government taxes, it's become even more difficult to heat our homes, buy gas and groceries. Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas explained how some of her constituents are also having a difficult time paying their bills.
Marley came into my constituency office last week, tears in her eyes and her heating bill in her hand. She was worried because, you see, the price of living has skyrocketed, but her payment at work has not increased at all. She'll pay part of the bill, but she can't pay all of it. She'll have to make up for it next month, hopefully. But the problem is that she's doing this with every single one of her home bills. To make matters worse, the carbon tax is increasing by 25% on April 1st. My question is simple, while those across the aisle boo me for my question. And it is this: on behalf of Canadians, when will the punitive tax hikes be stopped?
The opposition is raising the issue of affordability, so let's review what we've done since taking office. We lowered taxes for the middle class twice and raised them on the wealthiest 1%, and the Conservatives voted against. We created the CCB index to inflation, and the Conservatives voted against. We provided seniors with a 75 years old one-time payment of $500, and guess what? The Conservatives voted against. This side will focus on affordability. That side should get on board.
Now, you may have noticed that gas has gone up around 11 cents a litre recently. Some areas of Canada, including Vancouver, are now seeing $2 a litre. Here in southwestern Alberta, we're hovering around $1.58 a litre. The president with the Canadians for Affordable Energy says you ain't seen nothing yet. Dan McTagg says once the Trudeau carbon tax goes up in April, the price of gas will go up even further. Dan joins us now. Now, Dan, how much more will we be paying at the pumps this spring?
Well, not even this spring. Try Sunday to Wednesday. You're looking at a net increase of 14 cents a litre. You're going to see $1.72.9 likely over the next 5 working days. Just a matter of time before gas stations realize that the replacement cost has now shot up on them about 14 cents a litre. So 172, 173, well, $1.80, sky's the limit. I mean, we haven't shifted from winter to summer gasoline, which comes on April 15th. We, of course, are going to see, as you mentioned, the Trudeau carbon tax, another 2.5 cents a litre. So, where are we going here? Anyone's guess, but there's a cost and consequence for blocking pipelines in Canada, the kind of pipelines that could deliver oil to the rest of the world and, really supplement what the spare barrels of oil that will now be effectively frozen off and cut off from Russia.
So, Dan, will we be seeing any relief anytime soon?
No. This is now an energy supercycle. World demand may be strong. Some saying this will create demand destruction. I don't see that happening yet, and it may not happen for quite some time. One thing is pretty clear. Some are suggesting $150 to $180 a barrel for oil. Well, what that means is that, a lot of people are going to simply have to park the vehicles. Gasoline on the Chicago markets went up 41 cents a gallon just today alone. If those kind of days ahead can happen, what's stopping us here in Alberta from hitting $2 a litre?
Wow, thanks so much, Dan. That was Dan McTagg, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. September 10th is the day the Conservative Party of Canada will be choosing its new leader. Those who are running will have until April 19th to throw their hat in the ring and until June 3rd to sell memberships. So far, the only person who's officially in is 42-year-old Pierre Poilievre. The Ottawa area MP declared his candidacy close to a month ago. His biggest pledge, if he becomes Prime Minister, would be that he would cancel the carbon tax and to support our energy sector.
A Poilievre government will repeal Justin Trudeau's anti-energy laws to allow us to build Canadian pipelines with Canadian workers using Canadian steel to bring Canadian energy to Canadian consumers. Furthermore, we will repeal C-69. We will also repeal C-48. C-48 bans us from shipping Canadian energy off the northwest coast of British Columbia. I will replace these anti-energy laws with new laws that protect the environment, consult First Nations and provide them with paychecks, and give quick decisions on proposed energy projects.
Now, there are other potential CPC candidates who are considering running for the leadership, and they include social conservative Leslyn Lewis, who is the third-place finisher in the 2020 leadership race, Jean Charest, the former Quebec premier, who also led the Progressive Conservatives in the mid-1990s, and Patrick Brown, who's the current mayor of Brampton, Ontario, also considering a run at the leadership, our former Harper cabinet minister, Peter MacKay, who placed second to O'Toole in the 2020 leadership race, and Michael Chong, a longtime Ontario MP who is currently serving as the Conservative critic for Foreign Affairs. Well, we had a slightly cooler day here in Lethbridge with light flurries in some regions. Jeanette Rocher is back with an early look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, when it comes to the white stuff, we may see a bit of it as we kick off the weekend.
Yeah, that is so true, because we could see a 30% chance of it this evening and another 30% chance on Saturday. So if you want to build a snowman with the kids, this could be the weekend to do that for sure. There's going to be plenty of it, as well as temperatures into the minuses, a little bit gusty winds as well this evening, 30 to 50 winds from the north. Into Saturday, we're looking at only about 15 km/h winds. As for the rest of the weekend and next week, I will have those details coming up for you later on in the newscast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Well, it'll be a packed house as the 2022 Tim Hortons Brier kicks off in our city. Teams from all across the country will be competing for the crown and glory in Canadian curling. BCN's Angela Stewart was at the NMAX Centre and brings us a preview, also what curling fans can expect from a couple of the teams.
Yeah, how all the curling action finally gets underway here at the NMAX Centre a little bit later. There are 18 teams, 14 teams from different provinces and territories, including 3 wildcard teams, and Team Canada will all be competing in 2 pools of 9. Now, last year's winner was Team Alberta, but Darren Moulding from Team New Brunswick believes his team is capable of winning this year.
Mostly all the top teams are here, and even though I do believe we're capable of winning, it's not going to be easy. It never is. But I do think we have the experience and talent to do some damage here.
Now, the skip for Team Wildcard 1, Brad Gushu, says he's pretty excited to play in the Brier after just coming home from Beijing and playing in the Olympics.
It's been a little chaotic, so I don't think we're coming in here fully rested, but very excited to play in front of some fans, and that's something we missed when we were over in Beijing. It was pretty quiet at times in the rink, and we're looking forward to having a good full house here for our games. We struggled over at the Olympics, so I certainly don't think it's playing momentum. I think we probably played more games in the last couple months than most of these teams being over at the Olympics, but we're excited to kind of get back out on the ice and play.
The winners of this year's Brier will represent the Men's World Curling Championship in Las Vegas. The 2022 Tim Hortons Brier goes until March 13th.
Thanks so much, Angela. That was video journalist Angela Stewart joining us from the Brier at the NMAX Centre here in Lethbridge. Members of the Royal Canadian Legion in the Netherlands have made their way to our city for a special event this weekend. Staff are inviting Lethbridge military enthusiasts to come down and listen to a presentation they'll be making on the work they've done in their country to remember the veterans who've sacrificed so much for the freedoms we enjoy today. Barry Swarthoff, a member of the Legion in the Netherlands, says the collecting of memorabilia and stories started within his own family.
It started with my father. My dad is still alive. He was 12 years old when the war ended. And he asked the Canadians, he came from Zutphen, and he asked the Canadians for a uniform. And the Canadians said, if you give us 6 eggs, we arrange a uniform for you. So he got a uniform, and I have a photo of him, 12 years old, and it was like a pyjama. He lived in it. He went everywhere with it. So, and that's the way it started to collect.
The presentation will also include activities at the Liberation Museum, which is located near the Legion in the Netherlands. The focus is on the Second World War and the Battle of Lochem, Holland on April 2nd of 1945. 7 people had to be rescued by firefighters after a fire broke out at a multi-unit apartment building in Lethbridge. Emergency crews responded to the blaze at the apartment building in the 800 block of 4th Street South around 3 p.m. Thursday afternoon. The residents who were trapped inside were not able to self-evacuate because of the thick smoke. Fire crews quickly brought a ladder up to the building and were able to get everyone out safely. Thankfully, no one was hurt, and the fire is under investigation. It isn't known just yet the cost of the damage to the building. The Kenney government has been pushing for a provincial police force and no longer using the RCMP. Independent Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes thinks that's a pretty good idea. Barnes says a provincial police force would give Albertans more autonomy when it comes to policing, similar to what Ontario and Quebec currently have.
Too often, rural crime is reaching extremes in Alberta. Albertans aren't feeling safe. Albertans aren't being protected. First of all, this would allow Albertans to have more control over the quality of their policing and directing it.
Catch the full interview with Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our broadcast. The province says it is releasing a couple of reports on coal mining in the Rocky Mountains. The reports come after 9 months of work from a 5-member panel that consulted Albertans across the province. The panel held 67 sessions with more than 70 groups and received 176 written submissions. The submissions and a survey of 25,000 respondents show Albertans have major concerns with open-pit coal mining in one of the province's most environmentally sensitive landscapes. The government is also expected to release its second report with the panel's recommendations of how the province should best proceed. Coal mining in the Rockies has become a hot-button topic in Alberta for 2 years, ever since the UCP revoked a policy that had protected those summits and foothills since 1976. The Interfaith Food Bank Society of Lethbridge has become a living wage employer. The food bank will now pay employees a minimum of $19 an hour. As Micah Quinn explains now, they've become the first in the city to do this after viewing the November 2021 report from the Alberta Living Wage Network.
It kind of solidified for us the need to increase our wages and really put our money where our mouth is.
The Alberta Living Wage Network was launched in November of 2021 and is in 15 communities across Alberta.
Being certified as a living wage employer is something that we feel really enhances our brand and our ability to influence change in our community. And so while it is difficult, your human assets tend to be one of the most valuable to your business. And we've certainly recognized that and hope that others will as well.
Staff from the United Way of Lethbridge in southwestern Alberta said that in the nonprofit community, there's typically been lower rates of pay.
So it's really important and really exciting to see this step forward and recognizing the importance of our staff and the importance of the work that they do in the community and taking away some of that burden of extra stress. It's really hard on people when they are struggling to pay their bills or worrying about where their next meal is coming from, and that just shouldn't be happening. Lethbridge at this point is looking at two living wage employers that are certified, and we hope to grow that number substantially over the coming months.
For more information on the Alberta Living Wage Network, you can visit livingwagealberta.ca. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Well, if you're thinking about furthering your post-secondary career, Lethbridge College will be hosting an in-person and virtual open house this weekend. You'll be able to learn all about the different programs, take a tour of the campus, and even learn about housing options if you'd be coming to school from out of town. College officials explain why they're hosting both a virtual and in-person event.
During the pandemic, we had to go completely virtual, and we found that it was actually quite successful. We have a number of online learners at Lethbridge College who never come to the city for their schooling, and we also have a student body that comes from out of province, a big draw from Saskatchewan, a little bit from southeastern BC, and then of course our international student audience. So what we found is that they really liked this virtual open house component, and we'll probably continue to host it.
Both events will be taking place tomorrow. The virtual event runs from 10 a.m. till 10 p.m., while the in-person event runs from 10 a.m. till 1 p.m. at the center core of the college. Well, we experienced some cooler temperatures and light flurries across much of southwestern Alberta today. We may see a little more of the white stuff on Saturday as well. Full weather details are coming up. Well, we saw a little bit of the white stuff again today, and we may be seeing a little bit more this weekend. Jeanette Rocher is back with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, we shouldn't put away those snow shovels just yet?
Not quite yet, Hal. No. In fact, snow shovels, windshield scrapers, mitts, I'd keep all of that pretty handy this weekend because we are going to need them. We are seeing another chance of flurries this evening, more chance of flurries into Saturday as well. Temperatures staying in the minuses for the weekend here, -3 on Saturday. Same thing for Sunday, except not the snow. Mix of sun and cloud on Sunday. Up to 8 degrees, though, on Monday, and then back down to -8 for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We could see chance of flurries again on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. So it feels like Old Man Winter is definitely hanging on here. I think the calendar says we want to be in spring soon, but yeah, Mother Nature not quite agreeing with that. Average high for this time of year, 4 degrees, -8 the average low. 17 was our high temperature back in 1987. And in 1962, we were sitting at -32 degrees. 7:08 is when the sun rose this morning and sunset this evening at 6:18 p.m., giving us around 11 hours and 10 minutes or so of daylight. Looking to the west coast for tomorrow, beautiful sunshine on the coast tomorrow. Victoria's high 12 degrees, Vancouver high of 10 degrees. A bit windy though in the Straits of Georgia, about 30 km/h winds. 2 degrees the high tomorrow in Edmonton, mix of sun and cloud. Calgary's high -1, also partly cloudy skies. They could also see a little bit of flurry action as well. -11 in Saskatoon and Regina. Both of those cities actually looking at snowfall warning this evening. Into tomorrow, though, looking at 60% chance of more flurries. Flurries also expected tomorrow in Winnipeg with a high of -5. As we look to the central part of the country, not so bad at all. 5 degrees at Toronto with partly cloudy skies. There is a chance of some snow in Ottawa, -2 the high, -4 in Montreal, with also a mix of sun and cloud and increasing cloud tomorrow in the afternoon. As we look to Atlantic Canada, we're seeing sunshine mainly. Fredericton's high -1, 0 the high in Halifax, -4 in Charlottetown. St. John's looking at snow squall warnings and also having some snowfall, -5 the high there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The Biden administration is looking to ban U.S. imports of Russian crude oil, and Congress is looking to punish the Kremlin for its invasion of Ukraine. Earlier this week, the White House rebuffed suggestions from lawmakers that the United States ban Russian oil. But pressure has grown for a ban along with American outrage over Russia's invasion, and lawmakers have made it clear that they will act. Russian oil, however, made up only around 3% of all crude shipments that arrived in the United States last year. Now, when you include other petroleum products, including unfinished fuel oil, that number jumped to 8%. An engineer with Amtrak has been acquitted of charges related to a deadly high-speed derailment that left 8 people dead and more than 100 injured in Philadelphia in 2015. The jury cleared 38-year-old engineer Brandon Bastian of causing a catastrophe, involuntary manslaughter, and reckless endangerment. The train was going more than 160 kilometers an hour on an 80 kilometer an hour curve when it derailed. Amtrak had already settled civil litigation for $265 million. Stocks around the world racked up more losses on Friday, even following a good report on the U.S. jobs front. Worries on Wall Street continue about the war in Ukraine. The S&P 500 was 1.2% lower in afternoon trading. Markets around the world have swung wildly on worries about how high oil prices will go. Also, wheat and other commodities produced in the region because of Russia's invasion, inflaming the world's already high inflation. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 152 points on the day to finish at 21,402. The Dow was down 179 points to 33,614. The S&P 500 was down 34 points to 4328. And the Nasdaq was down 224 on the day to 13,313. West Texas Intermediate oil was up $8.01 to $115.68 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 29 cents to $5.02 US. Gold was up $34.74 to $19.70 US an ounce. And silver was up 53 cents on the day to $25.70 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $13.47 per bushel. Barley's at $9.68. Canola's at $24.33. And corn is at $11.91 per bushel. Live cattle were down $2.58 to $135.78. Feeder cattle were down $3.23 to $153.13. And lean hogs were down $4.75 to $100.45. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 78.56 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is headed to Europe as the fallout from Russia's invasion of Ukraine intensifies. Trudeau will spend next week in meetings in cities such as Berlin, London, and Warsaw, saying he's joining partners to stand against Moscow's aggression. More than 2,000 civilians have already lost their lives across Ukraine a week into the Russian invasion. The UN also estimates that 1.2 million refugees have also fled the country since the beginning of the war. There's an MLA who believes strongly that Alberta should bring in a provincial police force similar to what Ontario and Quebec have. Independent Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes will explain why he thinks that initiative will be more effective than the RCMP. He'll have details for us in just a moment.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Southern Alberta's largest home and garden show returns. The 2022 Home and Garden Show is taking place from March 30th to April 2nd at Exhibition Park in Lethbridge. With over 270 exhibitors, you'll discover a wide range of home and garden products, from flooring and cabinets to hot tubs and fireplaces, and much, much more. Admission is $8.50, $7.50 for seniors, and children 12 and under can enter for free. Parking fee is $5. For tickets and for more information, visit hglethbridge.ca. The Lethbridge Symphony Orchestra is celebrating their 60th anniversary with a performance of a special selection of memorable movie music from the past 60 years. Here's some of the most popular theme music from The Godfather, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and so much more. This special presentation is taking place Monday, March 21st at the Southminster United Church, with doors opening at 7 p.m. To purchase tickets and for more information, visit lethbridgesymphony.org. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Political representation is an important aspect of our democratic life here in Alberta. Recently, there's been a lot of talk about an independent Alberta. Albertans are apt to protect their ways of life and speak for what they want and what they think is right. Drew Barnes is the independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, and he's no stranger to standing up for and speaking out for what he believes is right. Drew Barnes joins me now to talk about the issues facing Alberta. Drew, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for talking to me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, Drew, there's been there's been a lot said over the years about equalization of payments and spreading Alberta's wealth across the country. You were part of that Fair Deal panel, and one of the recommendations of the panel was to consider the creation of a provincial police force. So we've heard that this is a very expensive option, but can you maybe tell us why the provincial police force might be a good idea for the people of Alberta?
Well, great. Thank you for that. Well, first of all, more control over our policing. Too often, rural crime is reaching extremes in Alberta. Albertans aren't feeling safe. Albertans aren't being protected. First of all, this would allow Albertans to have more control over the quality of their policing and directing it. Secondly, it comes down to a large part of the leverage in the situation we're in with our Canadian partners. Not only do we send upwards of $25 billion a year to Ottawa, the relationship has been defined to me as even abusive at times. We can't get pipelines. We can't get free trade with our Canadian partner. And that brings back the quality of life and the income for Alberta families and Alberta communities. So there's some of us that believe that yes, we want to be a strong part of Canada, but we need equity and fairness. So things like our own police force, like Ontario and Quebec both already have, would not only give us the opportunity for more say and control over our policing, but it would help Ottawa understand that Albertans want to have more control over their situation, and we want a fair deal. We want resource movement, and that would be a good first step.
Mm-hmm. So considering that idea of a provincial police force, you obviously see value there where others say it's just too expensive?
Well, I think part of the problem there is Premier Kenney, my goodness, in his third year, he has lost so much trust with Albertans and Alberta municipalities. He hasn't clearly conveyed to our municipalities how it would work and how the cost would be. As an example, I understand that right now the federal government supports Alberta to the tune of about $350 million a year for policing. But again, in some municipalities, were understaffed. And secondly, the cost of policing has just been increased substantially. I mean, God bless the individual work that individual RCMP officers do, but I understand they just all got a $20,000 retroactive raise, which of course, eventually the taxpayer will have to pay that. So with the other financial situations that Ottawa's boxed themselves into, it's only going to get less and less likely that they'll continue to support policing, through Alberta. So let's put Alberta families first in mind. Let's make our communities safer. Secondly, let's have more say over our police force and where we need them. And thirdly, let's show the rest of Canada that it's time that Alberta be treated with equality and fairness, that we get resource movement, and doing things like the police force are a step towards showing that we can be more autonomous.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that maybe the provincial government just has not done a good idea of educating these individual municipalities on the benefits of what a provincial police force might look like? I believe there's something like 80 some odd municipalities across Alberta that are banding together to present to the provincial government their reasons for why this is not a good idea. Do you think that they just haven't been sort of informed, or do you think that they're going into this well-informed and they just still are, standing firm and saying no?
Yeah, well, I also think it's partly municipalities have had a lot of pressure on them right now, our elected representatives. For many people in Alberta, this has been a tough 2 or 3 years, even longer with the change in oil pricing 5 or 6 years ago. And municipalities are hearing from their constituents that they can't raise taxes anymore. So good, caring councillors and mayors and reeves are concerned about having to pass more costs back to their ratepayers. So I think that's where it starts. But then the secondary problem is sometimes I'm hearing about how, because of staffing issues, that the RCMP can't be in enough places throughout rural Alberta, especially. So we need to have these services. So I guess to me that's where it starts. We need a provincial government that shows Alberta municipalities that when it comes to issues like safety, we'll be there for them. And of course, one of the silver linings of this bump in oil prices in the last little while is the Alberta Treasury is once again, a lot of money flowing in. So there'll be some extra money for important things. I very much would like to see government smaller, but also policing is a key part of it. So that's where it starts. Caring municipal councillors and mayors are concerned about the taxation future for their constituents. And then secondly, Jason Kenney has lost the trust of so many Albertans. They're wondering, if they're just wondering how this will all play out. So I think it's important to, get to the table with Ottawa, let them know that, yes, we want to be a strong part of Canada, but if not, we are prepared to be more autonomous and independent if necessary. Alberta should be the freest and most prosperous place.
Yeah, interesting. Now, Drew, can you maybe describe what this transition from RCMP to an Alberta police force would look like?
Yes. Well, Alberta used to have our own police force provincially in the 1930s, so it's not impossible. Basically, March 31st of any year, we have to give notice to the RCMP that we want out of the contract, even though I think it's 35 years left on the contract. So we can get out of it. Of course, Fort McLeod, you remember 6 or 7 years ago, they were going to set up a police training center at Fort McLeod. I mean, here we are on the basis of where we could do that again. Hey, and let's not forget that all the municipalities, the bigger ones rather, have their own police forces now anyway, except Red Deer. So Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, Edmonton, Calgary, Grand Prairie, we have our own police forces. So the training that could be in collaboration and coordination with these municipality police forces and our provincial police force is there anyway. So I believe it's just a matter of picking the right time, giving the RCMP the proper notice, putting out to our sheriffs and the existing RCMP members now that there'll be jobs available, making sure that our training center, whether it's in Fort McLeod or somewhere else, is set up, ready to go. And I think what will result will be much safer communities for Albertans, and long term, I don't think there'll be any budget consequences.
Okay, and you bring up an interesting point about how all the larger centers already have police force. We're talking more rural areas. One of the issues we do hear from rural Albertans is the lack of law enforcement in those rural areas. So do you believe that there's an equitable solution for these crime rates? And would the Alberta Police Force be that?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good point. I hear that all the time about how there may be only 1 or 2 officers covering 400 miles by 400 miles. And of course, we can all only be in one place at a time. Also, I hear quite a bit that our RCMP and our municipal police forces are having a little trouble coordinating the regional policing. As an example, criminals don't just do crimes in Medicine Hat, they'll run into Cypress County or 40 Mile County and Medicine Hat. So there is some element of cross jurisdictions. I absolutely believe that a provincial police force with the quality men and women that are out there to serve in it would be better at making sure that we were all protected more so, and to make sure that these jurisdictions that cross a bit would have better collaboration. So I think in the long run, we'd all be safer. We could all, and again, let's also not underestimate the fact that the Alberta Police Chief would be closer connected to Cabinet and the Premier, and the direction and the planning that could go from there would be better for all of us as well.
Oh, that's a good point. Interesting point that you bring up there. So speaking of Jason Kenney, where do you see Alberta headed in the next 2 years with Jason Kenney and the UCP?
It's absolutely clear that the UCP cannot win with Jason Kenney as leader. The last year shows the NDP way ahead in the polls and out fundraising Jason Kenney led UCP by miles. So it's essential that Albertans do what it takes to remove Jason Kenney as the leader of the UCP party, so the UCP can try to determine if they can go forward and present a new face for Albertans. If we don't do it, we're certainly looking at the NDP and the overreach and the big government that comes with them. It's 3 years in, and Jason Kenney has so not met the expectations of Albertans. He was given a grassroots, fiscally conservative mandate. And of course, that's resulted in sentences like, I'm the one that holds the pen, or I want a new base. And, unfortunately, Jason Kenney has lost the trust and the confidence of Albertans. And unless a change is made there, we'll be looking at another NDP government and the devastation that comes with that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, with the numerous other political interests on the right side of the political spectrum in Alberta, do you think the NDP could form the next Alberta government?
Well, the polls for at least a year now are showing that they're in the majority territory, and they would, if everything is as it is today, that they would form the majority government. But let's not forget that consistently 75% of Albertans identify or vote fiscally conservative. They are looking for an option where they can place their vote with trust and confidence. And unfortunately, Jason Kenney has lost both of those two things. So whether that means a change in the leadership of the UCP whether that means a new party on the right starting to fill that vacuum where Albertans are looking for economic freedom, individual opportunity, and fiscal conservatism. We're down now. The next election is the last Monday in May 2023, so we're about 14 months away. This spring is going to be very interesting as people start to figure out, their paths and where they want to go. And of course, that starts with the April 9th leadership review of the UCP of Jason Kenney's leadership. Hopefully that will be the day of real conservative change.
And Drew, where do you see yourself in the next Alberta election?
I'm very, very grateful to represent Cypress Medicine Hat, very grateful to represent Albertans for the last 10 years, 3 terms. And I believe I have the energy and the desire to still serve. Of course, I was ejected from caucus by Jason Kenney last May. And basically, he said he welcomed my public disagreement and debate, but he obviously didn't mean that when I was ejected. So I'm looking for a path forward so I can continue to represent Albertans that believe in economic freedom, individual opportunity, and public programs that are both effective and efficient. I'll be watching what happens very closely on April 9th. And if Jason Kenney is no longer the leader of the UCP, that may again become an option. And I just hope and pray that I have the opportunity to make the right decisions for my family, first of all, and Albertans.
Okay, and if Jason Kenney is still there, you would continue to run as an independent?
I'm certainly going to consider it. I will consider joining another party. I've also put out that Alberta should maybe have a rural party only. There's 87 seats in the Alberta legislature. 41 are not part of Edmonton and Calgary. I've put out that possibly we should start a party that just runs in those 41 seats that are not part of Edmonton and Calgary. There's a lot of good conservatives in Edmonton and Calgary as well, but this would allow us to focus on truly rural, let's call them non-metro concerns, and work in collaboration. It doesn't have to be divisive. We could do this as a potential coalition government. So I put that out there, and I've got pretty good reviews on that. A lot of people like the idea. Some think it could be bigger. But as I said earlier, we're now 14 months away from the next election, so it's time to make those decisions between now and May 1st.
Drew Barnes, thank you so much for joining me today.
I appreciate it. Love the chance to talk. You have a good rest of the day.
Now, many of you are familiar with the recent craze about something called the Metaverse. People who are purchasing virtual land and clothing and houses. So why is this actually happening? Dr. Jeff Zwirink has some thoughts on the issue. Dr. Zwirink is an astrophysicist and a senior research scholar with Reasons to Believe, an organization that combines science and faith. He's also author of several books, including Who's Afraid of the Multiverse? Welcome back to BCN, Jeff.
Glad to be here today. Looking forward to our conversation.
You bet. Now, what exactly is a metaverse for people who are just joining us right now? Some say it's the same as virtual reality, but can you really explain how it works?
So as I understand it, virtual reality is a part of the metaverse, but the metaverse is really just an online arena, an online playground, if you will, where people can come in and interact. And you got virtual reality that allows you to see what's going on. You could do augmented reality, which allows you to hear and feel things in a different way. But really, the metaverse is just a digital platform that allows all of these interactions to take place, and in some sense is only limited by the human imagination and the technology we can develop to allow people to interact inside the metaverse.
So some people are actually purchasing virtual homes. Why would people knowingly spend real money on property that doesn't actually exist, except online?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in some sense, there's people that spend money on stuff that I don't understand out in the real world. But I do know this. There's probably people who are doing it because there's a status to it. People want to have the latest and greatest thing. I imagine a lot of people are doing it because there's going to be some good business opportunities where as people start interacting in the metaverse, if you can build an experience that people want to have, whether it's a good meeting room, whether it's a cool vacation out through the Grand Canyon or something like that, people are going to want that. And the better the real estate or the better the location and the better it's marketed, you're going to have an opportunity to have a good business model there.
I wonder if it all started with those little games. I don't know if you remember the little handheld games where you had a pet, like a pet dog. You had to take care of it. You had to feed it every day, and sometimes you had to buy food or give it a shot, so whatever, take it to the vet. Maybe just kind of expanded from that into the metaverse. What are your thoughts?
Well, those are the sorts of ideas that are being played out there. And I find that illustration interesting because in some sense, I would really rather have a regular pet or whatever. But, it gave people an opportunity. I mean, there was some teaching value to that of teaching responsibility and discipline and regularity. And so, that's kind of what I see playing out in the metaverse there is that it's going to be a pretty remarkable tool. The question is, how are we going to use it? Are we going to use it to develop and advance humanity, or are we going to use it to do things that are a detriment to humanity?
I'm glad you brought that up. So do you think is it really good or bad overall that we have the power to create a type of alternative reality?
Well, in some sense, I think that's a question misses the point. And I'll give an analogy. Is it a good or a bad idea that we can build a car? Well, I mean, the car allows me to drive multiple places, to haul people around, to take vacations, to help other people. And used improperly, like if I give it to my 5-year-old kid, they could go out and cause a lot of damage with it. The metaverse, to me, it's a big tool. The question is not whether it's good or bad. I think it's great. It's a reflection of how God has created us and endowed us with the ability to create and advance and build technology. The big question in my mind is, how are we as humans going to use this? Because we're ultimately the people that are going to wield the tool.
Now, perhaps we got a bit of a taste of the potential impact of augmented reality after the film Avatar hit theaters. It's been said that with the beauty of the virtual world, people couldn't deal with the flatness of the real world. And especially maybe now, perhaps people are looking for escapism as they deal with the pandemic and so much depression and anxiety in our world today. What do you think?
I think that's a very big concern that we need to think seriously about. You could argue with a car that whether that's good or bad, you can kind of make the car and decide after the fact. But with this virtual reality metaverse type world, it may be before we're even aware of the problems arise, or before we can even do anything about them. And I think Avatar is a good example of that. We could give people this experience of being somewhere they weren't actually there, but it becomes kind of this very real experience. And yet now when you go back to the real world, it just doesn't seem like it's got the excitement or the beauty or the whatever. It's almost like when you take a drug or something, it makes things seem so much bland afterwards, and it takes a long time to recover. And I wonder if that's going to play out in the metaverse, that will make a world that is so engaging to be in that when we come back to the real world, it's just too depressing. And, you saw suicide and depression rise after Avatar. And so that would be very detrimental to humanity. And we need to think about those sorts of things before we engage too deeply.
Jeff, some people say that the metaverse is like a spiritual counterfeit of God's universe, where we get to play God and put our world into a place we think it should be. What are your thoughts?
I'm certain that's going to be the temptation for many people, and I don't know how many, but quite honestly, when a lot of people look at God, they say, hey, I don't like the way he's done it. I don't like this and such thing going on. And so the idea that we can go in and create our own reality, we think we will do it better. The reality of it is when we exercise that out in the real world, very often, again, unless you come from very good values and well thought out, we tend to make things worse. And so the idea of creating our own reality so that we can play God historically has never worked out well. And so if we're using the multiverse or the metaverse to do that, I don't see good things coming from that. We're escaping from reality instead of living in the reality that God has designed.
Amen. Now, if the metaverse continues to grow, Jeff, could this end up being even more all-consuming than our current social media channels?
Well, that's the kind of reality we're building. You get to go in and choose, whether you're big, tall, smart, fat, whatever. You get to choose what it looks like. It will enable us to live in a fantasy world for so long. And again, coming out of that is going to be increasingly difficult. I consider myself a fairly disciplined, fairly rational person, and I find myself sucked into social media. Instead of taking time to pray or think about this problem or work on this, I want to scroll through Facebook for the next funny thing that might amuse me. I just think that's an inherent problem in humanity, that we want to look for those escapes. And the more draw, the more fascination, the more beautiful, the more intriguing the metaverse is, the more it's going to do that. And we may get so far in that we can't get ourselves out because the addictive power is too great.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, Jeff. I was just thinking to myself, if somebody were to create this perfect metaverse with a perfect life, perfect vacations, you're driving $1 million sports car, and then you leave that metaverse, come back to your real life in the real world, that may be crushing and disappointing, and then maybe you might even fall into depression. So there's that danger as well.
Absolutely. And one of the things I find ironic about this desire behind the metaverse, and again, I think there's a lot of good things we can do in the metaverse, medical things and educational things we could do. But the idea of building another reality that is better than this one that we get to design, what's fascinating about that is that if God is who he says he is, as revealed in scripture, that this world is a testing ground for that beautiful, perfect creation where there is no strife, where there's harmony among people, where there's all good, where you don't get tired, where you're accepted as you are, that God has created that place for us and has given us glimpses of it. And yet here we are trying to create that on earth instead of living and abiding by what he said it. And so it's kind of this odd, ironic situation where God has given us a desire for that, and we're choosing to fulfill it in a way that will probably cause a lot of damage instead of ultimately build humanity up.
I like how you touched on maybe the medical community and then maybe medicine in the metaverse. How can we potentially expand on that to really help mankind?
Well, I mean, the example I can think of is, you imagine a doctor who's got great expertise in diagnosing certain diseases. Well, right now, they're limited in terms of their ability to serve by financial constraints, but really more by how many people can come into the office, who can get there. So there's some sort of radius and time constraints on which people they can help. Now, imagine, if you will, setting up with relatively simple technology, just a room where people who have diseases can now come in and engage in that room. He can treat people, that doctor can treat people on the other side of the earth in remote villages with primitive technology to provide healthcare and access around the world that otherwise wouldn't have been available. I mean, there are just ideas like that, or the teaching opportunities of, imagine being able to take a virtual tour of the Grand Canyon where you could get down and see the rocks. There are just great opportunities because the better we can simulate it in the metaverse allows people to actually experience and learn and get real, tangible, real world benefits from it.
So Jeff, in the end, is it really possible to escape the evils of this world to create a perfect one?
Well, I think you can make a very strong argument that the quote unquote evils of this world are ultimately related to how humanity manages the creation which God has given us. And so a lot of the tensions that you see are related to humanity's bad actions and poor choices. Well, humanity is the one that's wielding the metaverse. If we're the ones that have those problems, we're going to bring that into everything we create and make. And so the idea of building a metaverse that allows us to escape all the problems of the real world, that's just a pipe dream, because humanity is going to be the one doing that. Humanity is going to bring that same set of problems into the metaverse. So it's just not going to work to escape those problems.
I wonder what God's thoughts are as well, because, I mean, we're dealing with trials, tribulations here on this planet. He's helping us to grow and to learn along the way, and there's going to be pain along the way. And then we create this metaverse, which is completely perfect, and God's like, no, wait a minute, I've created that for you in heaven here, so don't worry about it, I've got it covered. What do you think?
I think God looks, I see an analogy in my children. It's like I look at them and I do things and want them to grow, and they do, but they make bad choices. And what's ironic is some of those bad choices is like the very thing they wanted, if they just listened to me, they would have gotten had they listened to it. And I think God's looking at it that's just like he wants the best, and realize, he's given us the ability to make choices. And he's there saying, oh, I've got so much better than what you're doing. Just please listen to me. This is the way to go. And yet we continue to go do things our own way. And he's very patient with us, very loving, and is always drawing us towards him. And so I don't think God's up there saying, they did it again, which is what I would do as a parent. But God's just saying, hey, I want what's best. And he's drawing us to him all the time.
Let me ask you something. With so many people hacking into other systems right now, all of the fraud going on in the world right now, the terrorism that's taking place, Do you think that the metaverse could be used as a weapon to attack maybe Western civilization?
Well, if history is any indication, that's certainly people will try to do that. I can go back and give you an example of another place where people invented something so that the idea behind it was to allow this free spread of information, to advance scientific knowledge, to benefit of humanity, and it's what we now call the internet. The whole basis of the internet was to allow scientists and academics to exchange information more readily and to advance knowledge more rapidly. Well, look what we do now. We've got to set up firewalls and we've got to worry about spam and we spend a lot of effort trying to keep people from misusing this very powerful tool. Metaverse is going to be the exact same way, again, because humans are the one who ultimately are going to use it. And it's naive to think there aren't people who are going to want to use it to do damage, to advance their cause, whether it's good for humanity or not.
Dr. Jeff Zwerig is an astrophysicist with reasons to believe. Thanks so much for joining us today from Covina, California.
Thanks for having me here. Enjoyed our time together.
You bet. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.